That doesn't ruin the vibe, right? Hello and welcome, everybody. Merry Christmas! Now, let's get this out. What was that? More pagan origin stories? Well, okay. Let's talk Christmas. Now, apologies for the lighting in this video. I am a frazzled bitch and I can't get my life together. So the only time I had to film this video was right now, or else it just would not happen. Someday, I'll get it together. But that is not today. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah Ruth Savita, aka The Woman in Wool. And on this channel, we knit, crochet, and talk history. Why? Because true crime and makeup are oversaturated. I'm just kidding. It's because in 2016, I moved to Dublin from New York. And ever since then, this has been a love letter to this country is this channel of mine. Another reason I have this channel is because I'm obsessed with history. And let's be honest, if you're here, so are you. Now, for those of you who don't know, my name is Hannah. I do things on Instagram, TikTok, and right here on YouTube, which are history videos about bits and pieces of history that I find interesting, mostly Irish history because I moved here and that's really what I like to think about, but other pieces of history as well. Sometimes we see my dog Odie, not today. He's on vacation. He is my manager. So, Merry Christmas, everybody. It is officially December, which means that it is dark Victorian Christmas season, or at least I like it to be. I am constantly kind of waffling back and forth between whether or not I want to go dark Victorian or nostalgic 1950s for my Christmas aesthetics. And honestly, either one is totally fine. I think the next video will be 50s nostalgic. And this video, obviously, dark Victorian. So we have just kind of an interesting video about bits and pieces about Christmas history and Christmas origins that I found interesting while digging a little bit deeper into the histories of Christmas. And this was originally going to be kind of a really deep dive into pagan origins of Christmas and other religions, like takes on celebrations in the winter and where Christmas comes from. You know, the claim that everything about Christmas is like from ancient Egypt and paganism and Nordic countries. Like that's what this video is going to be about at first, and then I realized that that is a way bigger video than I intended it to be. So that's going to come probably at another time. But this video is kind of going to be about... Hello? Did I fuck this up? Yes, I did. But this video is going to be more about different customs and practices and traditions surrounding Christmas and where they came from and how old they are, and just little bits and pieces that help us plug in pieces of the puzzle of why we celebrate Christmas the way we do today, which I found just kind of fun, interesting. It's kind of surface level, but it does dig into the history about it in a fun, vibey way. So without further ado, let's jump into the witchy pagan origins of Christmas, some customs, and maybe some Victorian era things that have turned Christmas into what it is today. I got my tea. Oh, that was good. Fuck, I put honey in that. I'm a genius. First and foremost, solstice. What is Christmas without solstice? Nothing. And if you're not new to this channel, you'll know that we cannot talk about Christmas or Halloween or any holiday without, of course, talking about pagan cultures and the pagan origins of the holidays. Because there are very earth-centered pagan rituals that predate the Christian Christmas by a long time that are pretty much the same or very, very similar in practice to Christmas rituals and what we think of when we think of Christmas time. So let's talk about some pre-Christian paganism, and especially here in Ireland. As discussed in my Samhain video, I am not a Celtic pagan expert by any means. I just know bits and pieces about how it relates to certain holidays, where it comes from, certain things like that, but I am not by any means an in-depth expert on Celtic paganisms, the rituals, the practices, the beliefs, or anything like that. But if you are interested in Celtic paganism and want to dive a little bit deeper, I highly recommend checking out Heather Wildflower's page. I'll link her here and down below. She not only knows about Celtic paganism and talks about Celtic paganism, but actually lives her life in Celtic paganism. That is her practice. That's her spiritual practice. So that's something that she does on the daily. And she lives her life as a Celtic pagan in Ireland, and she's out in Limerick. So give her a follow and check her out if you want to see some more Celtic pagan lifestyles and practices and things like that. But let's talk about what we do know. The Celtic or Irish calendar for things like season changes and holidays follows a different format outside of the Gregorian calendar that we know and use for everyday use. So how we think about dates and times is a little bit different than how the Celtic calendar would think about dates and times. It's kind of like the Hebrew calendar or the Chinese cultural calendar in that way. So in the Celtic calendar, we are just outside of the celebration of Samhain, which is the season change festival and initiation for winter. So yes, it has been officially winter here in Ireland since November 1st, and Irish pagans of the past would not only celebrate the season change festivals like Samhain or Beltana or Bealtaine, I've heard it multiple ways.
Boyle, I've heard it both ways.
But they also celebrate the solstices that the outside world would also celebrate but in a different way. So, for example, when I grew up in America, the winter solstice was supposed to mark the very first day of winter, which is the shortest day of the year and has the longest night. Whereas in Ireland, they celebrate that as kind of the peak of the winter, like kind of the center of it all. So it's been November, December, and then January is the end of winter. So we go into winter with the longer and longer nights. It hits the longest night and then it comes back down again on the outside. So the beginning of winter starts in the beginning of November. It peaks in December and then goes back down and ends at the end of January, which is logical and makes a lot of sense when you think about it. So the 21st of December would mark the middle of winter in Ireland and also the focal point of the Christmas season, obviously, just 4 days later with Christmas. And it is widely believed and kind of been popularized that the solstice is the reason that the church, as kind of an entity, decided to make Christ's birthday on that day, with many people citing different sources that saying that Christ's birthday was probably sometime in the spring if he was a historical figure at all. Don't come for me, okay? I know, I just say what I know. But I was actually listening to a podcast the other day called The Rest is History, and it was called Christmas, Christian or Pagan. Definitely take a listen to it if you're into that. And I've learned quite a few different things about kind of different kind of interpretations of different translations and different celebrations and misinformation that got passed around about these kinds of things. So that's something to dive into more. So after the podcast, now I'm all jazzed and I want to know more about the actual origins of the church's Christmas. But it seems to be that solstice in and of itself, the shortening of the days, the lengthening of the nights, the onset of the coldest part of the year is the reason for the season across all cultures and calendars and religions, marking the shortest day of the year, bringing people into the light out of the darkness, gathering together, warmth, feasting, and celebrating things like togetherness in what can be the loneliest, harshest, hungriest point of the year. When looking at it from like a farming calendar point of view, planting in the spring, sowing in the fall, the entire year has growth and fertility and food and warmth all around it, except for in the winter, where there does seemingly seem to be death and coldness and darkness and not a lot of time for growing or creating food in any way. So the idea of taking the harvest and saving it, bringing light, feasting at this time, celebrating your harvests and your collections from the previous year, it makes sense because this can be a very dark, sad time of the year. And it's always been that way, you know, so the solstice is a way to celebrate the coming back of the light and the warmth and to bring people together. And speaking of light into the darkness, famously, Ireland has a Neolithic structure called Newgrange that lights up during this time of year. What do I mean? Well, the Neolithic structure Newgrange is out in Meath in Ireland, and it was used for, we don't know, but we do know that it outdates the pyramids, so or whatever. It's essentially a dome-type structure made out of earth and stones, covered in symbols of ancient Celticism, ancient Celtic symbols. You get it. But from the outside looking in, it kind of looks like a big dome of earth. But on the inside, it's this kind of winding maze of stones making up little rooms and hallways. We think it might have been religious or potentially some sort of death celebration tomb in a way. And twice a year, on the winter solstice and on the summer solstice, the sun aligns with the openings in these outer walls of the structure, and the entirety of the inside of the structure fills with sunlight for just a moment or two, for a few minutes. And it is absolutely surreal from what I know. Because there is a lottery to get into to apply to it. I really should apply. And they pick your name and you can go in and you can see this twice a year phenomenon. It is just the wonders of the ancient world. They were so much more connected to the earth and to the cycles of the earth and to where we are in kind of space than I think we might ever be again. Like, not that we don't know now, because we have so much more technology, we have so many more tools to tell us where we are in space and the cycles of the earth, and we have very precise measurements of the cycles of the earth and everything like that. But we were so attuned and kind of connected to the earth as humans before technology took over and before, you know, I suppose farming. I'm not saying it was better back then. I'm just saying it was a different method of thinking. We were so connected to the cycles of the earth and how it moved and how it served us and how we could serve it that we created these huge structures to light up when the winter solstice happened, which is so funny that they would choose the winter solstice because it was the shortest day of the year and they wanted to make sure that they could see the light during those times. Now, connected to solstice, I believe everybody is going to tell me, is in fact Yule. You might have heard of Yule. It's another part of the Celtic calendar, but this Yule, from what I know, comes from the Nordic side of Celtic or rather Irish heritage. 1 second, I could count this. I had to choose a tricky pattern to do in the dark because it's so dark, it's hard to see the pattern. Perfect. This sort of fucking god. Christmas. And now from what I gather, there's a lot of overlap between Yule and solstice, which is not surprising. Yule, from what I've seen, encompasses the entirety of the kind of December, winter, Christmassy season from mid-December into early January, whereas the solstice is just the one day. And though the celebration of the solstice has been kind of a common theme in all cultures, or a lot of cultures, especially Northern Hemisphere cultures, where we become colder during this time of year, Yule was celebrated specifically in the Nordic and Scandinavian countries and was a season of their calendar that celebrated this particular time of year. And the reason it came into Ireland, obviously, was via this method. As we know, the Vikings at one point came into Ireland and started to take over and really changed not only the geographic makeup of Ireland, but the population makeup of Ireland and the cultural heritage of the island as well. A lot of Irish are actually Scandinavian, probably 1,000 years back. It's interesting to see those kinds of connections in the two cultures, the Scandinavian and the Irish. What was funny is one time I was in the Viking Museum in Oslo over in Norway. And when I went through it, I saw all of these Viking artifacts for the first time. And just what struck me was the carvings into the wood and the kind of design choices on things like ships and staffs and wooden or stone objects were so similar in nature to like Celtic knots and twists and symbols. It really got me because it was so connected. And you can see that in Ireland, the Viking influence, which is crazy. Another Viking influence, like I was saying, is in fact Yule. And the Scandinavian influence is Yuletide or Yuletime. And so what is Yule? It is generally accepted that Yule came from the Norse word Yol. Big summer blowout.
Big summer blowout.
I feel like I look like Anna today from Frozen a little bit, like an older version of Anna that likes to knit. The purpose or the original intent on the Yule or Yule celebration is kind of up for grabs. But again, it doesn't kind of take a lot of brain power to think cold, bring warmth into the cold, bring light, bring togetherness, bring fun and joy and food into the coldest, darkest, hungriest point of the year. So my thought is it was a cultural celebration that brought warmth into the cold. Bring some light up in this bitch. And it is one of the oldest winter festivals that we know of. And here's the fun part, because this is kind of where we get into Christmas today. A lot of scholars and historians have seen common themes, like fire, light, food, warmth, togetherness. And then also in Yule or Yule in the very ancient times, they see things like sacrifices to things like gods or the supernatural, like supernatural beings, like elves, which is so cool because it brings in that whole Santa's workshop, elves theme into Christmas. Because you always wonder, like, why elves? Why are elves in Santa's workshop? Was it just magical and cool to like think about? Or to just put elves in there because it seemed magical and Christmassy. But the real connection there is this Nordic holiday of Yule and bringing sacrifices to supernatural beings like elves who could help you throughout the year. Ireland has a very big history with things like fairies and little fecky creatures as well, like leprechauns and fae and fairies, creatures that could either help or hinder you depending on how you treated them or how you treated certain things. And it kind of harkens back to that to me, where if you're nice to them, they're nice to you. So if in the Nordic cultures, if you sacrifice to the elves, potentially you got a really great Yule or Yule, and you got to have a great harvest the following year and not a bad winter, and the winter would treat you well. So Santa's workshop having elves work in it, creating toys and things like that, it kind of starts to piece together, for me anyway. And to answer your question, yes, because I am short, I am recalled to Santa's workshop every year to make the toys. I am in charge of my own department this year, which is very exciting for my career opportunities. It was in the 9th century AD when Yule officially became the word for Christmas in most Nordic languages. So like in Danish or Swedish or Norwegian, Yule, Yule, all of these words mean Christmas time, which is where we get different words pulling into the English vocabulary as well, things like Yuletide. I myself made the Yuletide gay. I'm sorry. And some things we still practice today is the burning of a Yule log, which is just the log you burn during Yuletide, obviously. And it would burn for multiple days during the festival. And it's now available in cake format. And actually in the Nordic countries, I found something out during my research, is that sometimes they just make a big goat out of straw. 10 out of 10. I don't know. I love it. And apparently this is supposed to be kind of like a tribute to the god Thor because he drives a chariot that is pulled by goats. So that's fun. And now just thinking about it, actually, it makes sense. Like Thor having a chariot pulled by goats and them having a big goat during Christmas time. Maybe that's where the reindeer came from, the chariot pulled by the reindeer. That's something to look into. I should have probably Googled before I came on. But that was interesting to see, is all of these kind of little bitty connections with the Norse and the Nordic and Christmas today, which is quite cool. Now, let's talk Christmas trees. Because what's Christmas without a Christmas tree? I guess Yule? Now, a takeaway that I've had from most of my research in the year I've been doing kind of like History Tube or History Talk or whatever, is that the Victorians had a lot to do with how we function and think today. So like the way we think of ancient Egypt and the way we think of paganism was shaped by the Victorians. And that is absolutely no exception for the Christmas tree. So like a good example of this is the wedding dress. There was no wedding dress before Queen Victoria. Women would just wear their nicest gown in whatever color they had that looked the best on them for their wedding day. And they would use it again whenever they had to. Or they would have a special dress made and then they would use it again. But Queen Victoria wore white to her wedding and she had a special made dress just for the wedding and never wore it again. So after that, women started to do the same thing. They had a custom white dress for their wedding that they would wear one time and never wear again. And that was the wedding dress. And that's how it started. And so a lot of the themes you'll see actually in the Victorian era is that if the queen is doing it and if the royal family is doing it, everybody wanted to do it too. Things like status and title and closeness to the royal kind of echelon of people was very important for high society in the Victorian era. So if the royal family was doing it, you obviously wanted to do it too. So this way you had that connection. You did the same things as the royals. You were high society as well. You were well-to-do. And even if you weren't like a duke or a duchess or you didn't have a title like count, like then at least you practiced high society. And if you were in any way wealthy, people would associate you with high society. So the Christmas tree was popularized by the Victorians. But let's start from the beginning. The Christmas tree is, of course, an evergreen tree and is very much on the nose for the kind of themes that we've been talking about today. Evergreen, ever alive, never dying in the winter, bringing light and flourishment and thriving in the home in wintertime. Bringing that kind of life into the house during the death part of the year. And even in ancient Egypt, they would bring green palms and papyrus plants into their house during the colder parts of the year to symbolize triumph over death and life over death. Vikings and Scandinavian countries would bring in green boughs into their home to decorate their home with during this time of the year. And of course, mistletoe and holly are part of that evergreen family that stays green during the winter, and so they would be used to decorate your homes as well. And that's where we get the mistletoe and holly decorations for the winter part of the year as well, which is quite interesting to see, because they were evergreens, and you would bring them into your home to symbolize life over death. But the actual first Christmas tree itself, bringing a whole tree into the home, is back from Germany, where they would decorate it with actual fucking candles. Oh my God. It is widely believed that Martin Luther himself actually brought the first Christmas tree into his home and put candles on it to mimic the stars out in the sky. So he saw the Christmas tree, or he saw an evergreen tree rather, and with all the stars surrounding it, it looked absolutely so beautiful. He chopped it down and brought it into his home and decorated it with candles to mimic that kind of look. But I talked about the Victorians popularizing it. So if this was in Germany, and Queen Victoria and the English popularized it, how did that happen? Well, Victoria married a German, obviously, and he was well used to having a Christmas tree every year brought into his home. And so when Queen Victoria and Prince Albert had children, they started to decorate the Christmas tree with the children. It was said that they would go and get it themselves. They wouldn't have servants do it. They would chop it down. They would bring it back home, and that they would decorate it themselves as a family, which is what we still do today. Like, you don't buy a pre-decorated tree usually. That's something that could have happened if Queen Victoria hadn't decorated it herself. But since this picture of Queen Victoria and her children was illustrated and then sent around England, of her and her children and her husband decorating the tree together, of course, if you're a Victorian in higher society and you want to be known as closer to the Queen, you would do the same exact thing. And it became a very popular thing to get a tree or cut down a tree and bring it into your home and decorate it with your family. It became the main thing to do when previously it had never been done before, or at least very rarely. Now, how did it get to America? Also German immigration, more towards the 1700s or the middle part of the 1700s when German immigration became fairly popular to go into the United States, which wasn't the United States at the time. But during the Puritan era of the United States, a lot of people considered the Christmas tree to be a pagan symbol or a kind of godless symbol of Christmas and celebration. And again, it wasn't popularized until Queen Victoria erected hers. And then it became a more popular thing to do. If the Queen of England was doing it, surely it was fine and celebratory and festive to do the same. It gave it the kind of check mark of approval that Americans needed to bring the tree into their home as well. And I personally love the kind of Victorian Christmas vibe that Christmas can have, like the Nutcracker or something, like oranges, chestnuts, different spices that would have been used at this time. And a lot of those spices still carry into what we know about Christmas and Christmas flavors today. Things like allspice, cinnamon, nutmeg, star anise, oranges, apples, fruits that are dried or dried out like fruitcake, mince pies, that whole flavor palette of Christmas, dark, flavorful spices. Because winter was halfway over, you could take the stuff that you had stored and kind of taken and eat it and feast. And you could have this kind of big, fatty, delicious bird or side dishes and have this big feast with all of these different kind of flavor palettes, and they would be celebratory because they would be rare. You wouldn't be able to get oranges in England in the winter usually, but if you could manage to get your hands on one, you would give it as a gift, and people would be just so excited about getting oranges or cloves or something because they were so rare in Ireland and England at the time that if you managed to get your hands on one, it was just so amazing. And it was the kind of vitamins and minerals that your body needed at this time of year, because in the middle of December, you're not getting much vitamin C, are you? So an orange this time of year would have been exactly what you needed and exactly what you wanted. It would have been sweet and delicious and a real treat and perfect for your immune system. Also, there was an article that I read that said that things like cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, all of these were good for your immune system as well, which is why another reason people would eat it during this time of year, because not only was it rare and a celebration food to have during things like Christmas or the special occasions, but also it was good for you. So at the time where you're probably going to get sick, it's good to eat these things that are good for you. And of course, the lovely Victorian handmade wooden toys, all natural, delightful, painted in lead or asbestos or something to really seal home the Christmas deal. So thank you for listening. Apologies about that. My microphone died. Merry Christmas. Like and subscribe if you liked this. And if you enjoyed my stuff, please click on my Instagram, TikTok, follow me here on YouTube, and enjoy your Christmas. And don't be ho-ho-hos. I don't know. And enjoy your Christmas. I will see you in the next 2 weeks, hopefully, with another video on a more deep dive on Christmas origins or some vibes and vintagey Christmas stuff that you might enjoy. So happy Christmas. I'll see you soon, and goodbye.